Today, the spring underneath Hodgson Mill produces 28,900,000 gallons of water a day. It is the most photographed mill in the United States. The water underneath the mill stays at a constant temperature of 58 degrees year-round. Now you might think that all this information is useless, but you might also think that a mill is just for grinding grain into flour or meal. But for many Americans, a mill was the community center. A place to lie back and talk a while and gossip. A place where children could play in the nearby fields. Mills were a part of life, a piece of a community. This was no different for Hodgson Mill. January 20th, 1869. A man by the name of William Holman walks up to the Springfield courthouse with an idea of buying land on the Bryant River in Ozark County, Missouri. William Holman bought the land under the Homestead Act of 1820. This act allowed a person to buy 40 acres of land for only $50. William Holman took the advantage of this great bargain and bought the land in Ozark County. After the deal passed, he quickly made way for the new land he just purchased and instantly started building a mill on the Bryant River. This mill was known as Holman's Grist Mill and was the first mill on the Bryant River. The mill provided ground and goods for stores and families miles around. But in late July 1879, William Holman died and gave the land and the grist mill to his wife, Mary Holman. Miss Holman had no need to keep the land, and with no knowledge of running a mill, she sold it to John Wall for $200. John Wall only kept the land for a couple of months before he sold the land to Albert and Arthureza Blackwell for $250, who sold it the next year to Joseph Epperly for $300. After a year of ownership, the Epperlys sold the property and mill to Manuel J. Smith and his wife, Elizabeth Smith, for $250. Samuel and Elizabeth Smith sold it next year to Alvy L. Hodgson. Hodgson used Holman's mill for a time, using the wood turbine to operate the cotton gin, and grist mill was operated by an overhead tumbling shaft. But Hodgson was constantly asked to start running a flour mill. So in the winter of 1893, Hodgson went to Lake Charles, Louisiana, to earn some extra money by working in a sawmill. With this money, he bought equipment to build a new flour mill. At the end of the winter, Hodgson came back to Ozark County, Missouri, where he rented a movable sawmill, placed it near the location where the current Hodgson Mill would be built. After he got the sawmill in place, he immediately started the production of Hodgson Mill. First, he had to cut back the limestone rock that now sits behind the mill. Then, he started cutting and placing the huge pine beams that supported the heavy mill above the ground. After putting up the foundation, Hodgson finally started building the original building. Hodgson worked every day except Sunday, from dawn till dark. The new mill didn't run like an old-fashioned mill with a water wheel. This mill ran with turbines underneath the water, where every turn of the turbine would move a series of gears that was connected to two grindstone wheels. These heavy 20-inch Hodden flint millstones from the Pyrenees Mountains of France were bought for $1,200 and were made by the Bernard and Lease Company. Another thing that this mill has that other mills do not have was that this mill had a 16-horsepower boiler to heat the mills during the cold winter nights. It took Hodgson 13 years to complete the flour mill, a Boy Scout camp on top of the hill, establish a general merchandise store, and a post office, which he called Sycamore because of the sycamore trees in the area. Within the mill, Hodgson also built a cotton gin. Rumor has it this gin was the gin that started Big Smith overalls. In 1898, after 1 year of completing the mill, Hodgson sold the mill to his brother, George Hodgson, for a pretty penny of $1,333. After selling the mill to his brother, Hodgson left Sycamore and moved back to the Norfolk River, where he built another famous mill, Dot Mill. George Hodgson ran the new mill successfully through the years on the Bryant River. All the commercial flour that was produced at the mill was hauled to railroad depots in West Plains and sold to wholesalers. While George was in charge of Sycamore, Hodgson was at Dot, building the mill similar to Hodgson Mill, with a general store, cotton gin, and a sawmill. Hodgson ran Dot Mill into 1909 when he sold it, and went to Henderson, Arkansas to run a sawmill. That sawmill is now under the water of Lake Norfolk. After several years at Henderson, Arkansas, Hodgson's eyesight began to fail him, and he returned to Sycamore where he helped his brother work on the mill. Even though his eyesight was gone, Hodgson could still run the machinery by simply filling the machine. Albie Hodgson died in 1921. 5 years later, George Hodgson would die from a busted appendix. After George Hodgson died, the mill sold to McCleary for $4,800. McCleary sold it to Fred Foster on October 5, 1934. Mr. Foster sold it to Walter Rowley for $3,500. 5 days later, after Rowley bought the mill, he sold it to Charles T. Ade of West Plains, Missouri. Now owned by the Ade estate, it has a double name since the time of purchase in 1934. It was now called Ade Hodgson Mill. Ade allowed the field across the mill to be used for public picnics and baseball games. The Sycamore baseball team would play against local teams like Gainesville. Ade also put in a gas pump near the mill.
You know, everybody said, well, you know, what about the river? The river will get up over the gas pump and everything. Well, he knew it probably would, but he was wanting to put it in anyway, and sure enough, it was really coming up fast. We was down there. I was with several men there, and they said, "Well, what can we do with the gas pump?" Well, there's nothing to do. It's going to go over top of it, and so they hewed out a stop and put some wraps and regs around it and made a stopper, and of course, water was already up pretty high on it, coming up on it anyway, and I was about 9 or 10 years old, and they said, well, hey, you take this stopper out there and drive it into the tops of the breathers on top of that gas pump. So I did. They had a big plank there, and I walked up on there, and they had it laying up on top of there, and I took it out there and drove it in the top of it, and the water ran right on over the top of it. You couldn't tell where it was at.
The day before Thanksgiving, the mill would host turkey shoots in the field across the mill, where families could not support themselves would be able to have a turkey for Thanksgiving.
Every year around Thanksgiving, me and Paul would travel down to Hodgson Mill, where they would host turkey shoots. These shoots would allow poor people, like us, to shoot a turkey that was fenced in the wild. Once we'd shoot a turkey, we would travel back to the house with turkey over our shoulder. November 26, 1925.
During the hot summer nights, the mill would host ice cream socials in the upper garden above the mill, where families could gather around, socialize, or listen to boxing or the Grand Ole Opry on the radio. In 1949, Fred and Cecil Leach came to live in Ozark County and leased the mill from the Ade estate. Fred Leach, whose background was milling, took over the operation at the mill. He renovated the building and repaired the machinery, like buying a new water power turbine, which was used to produce electricity for the mill. With electricity in the mill, the workers can now work late hours. At times, up to 2,000 pounds of mill and flour was produced in a day. Leach used wholesalers to market his product, but all this milling came at a price.
Well, it's a fatal accident. My uncle and his wife, they had their nephew, my uncle's wife, sister's boy down there. He was a little boy about yay high, and they had the sheller running on the back porch back there, and he was up there and got his leg down in there while the sheller was running, and mangled it bad, and they rushed him to town, but he didn't make it.
Sometime in the late 50s, a two-story store that was located near the mill burned down due to careless fire protection. In 1962, Leach gave up the lease on the mill and quit producing mill products. After the lease on the mill was for sale, Harold Stott bought the lease on the mill and started producing grain and rye mills. In 1969, Stott gave up operation of the mill because of illness in his family. The lease was assumed by Ken and Tina Harrington from Kansas City. Advertisement in the four-time Rural Electric Missourian and the Gourmet magazine, a cover spot in the 1878 highway map. This brought tons of business to Hodgson Mill. Business boomed so much that in 1974, Harrington's had to buy a new packaging machine and two burr stones just to keep with the demand. With all the commotion around the mill, Ewell Gibbons decided to film a commercial for Grape Nuts cereal at Hodgson Mill. In 1975, the Harrington's Hodgson Mill Enterprise, as it was known, was ready to expand. The mill on the Bryant Creek could no longer be capable of producing the amount required to keep up with the orders, so they began building an industrial development in Gainesville, Missouri. After the move to Gainesville, the corporation continued to grow. 13 years later, in 1988, the Harringtons sold Hodgson Mill Enterprises to the Seymour Corporation, where they still produce ground goods under the name Hodgson Mill. The products are now produced in Effingham, Illinois, under new owners, the Goldstein family. Since the corporation left the mill itself went through many owners that kept the mill in its original form. In 2000, the mill was restored. Boards were replaced, equipment was added, and some equipment was removed. No longer being used for milling, the owners turned the mill into a gift shop that sells merchandise made by local crafters, and the field across the mill can be used to host picnics, weddings, and parties. You can now walk around the grounds. Many paths go all the way down in the stream until the spring dumps into the Bryant River. So next time you're back at Hodgson Mill, travel back in time to the summer night parties, the bustling business of a community, kids playing in the nearby field, and the sound of a mill that has run throughout the ages.